Why does the media hate Trey Lance so much? And it's late, but let's talk about that schedule right here on 9 and 8's Nonsense. Hello and welcome to 9 and 8's Nonsense. I know I took last week off and there was supposed to be a show on Tuesday. It was a crazy week. First of all, I just want to start this show by saying everyone who reached out on that picture on Twitter, everyone who saw the picture and said, hey, I hope you're okay. I really appreciated it. It made me feel loved. My mom even texted me and was like, have you seen everyone's saying on your tweet? And I was like, yes, but my driver's license is on, or my license plate is on there, and I have to delete it. But besides that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It was really cool that you guys did that. That anyone said anything. I didn't really expect anything. I was just I was just in shock, and I posted it because I was like, okay, I got to show people why I'm canceling the show so they don't think I'm just being a cat. But we're here. We're finally going to talk about the schedule a week late. And, of course, I got Rohan. I'm going to say your last name wrong. I should have asked you before the show. It's Chakravarthi, right?
Chakravarthi, close enough.
Chakravarthi. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. My last name's Nelson, so I've never had anyone say it wrong ever, the history of anything. So I'm sure everyone says your last name wrong every time you go on. How you doing, man?
Oh, yeah. Even my own family will do it at some point, so it's all good. We're fine here.
Well, I mean, it's been kind of a crazy week, obviously. The schedule came out last week, around this day last week, and I just wasn't able to get a show up, so I know I'm late on the schedule release, but man, I never thought in a million years that I would be hashtagging arm fitness, but here we are. I was bored today at work, so I hashtagged arm fitness, and so I don't know. I was in the hospital for a lot of the time today, so maybe you can kind of explain what is the deal with this arm fitness thing, what was said, and why is this such a big deal all of a sudden?
Yeah, so earlier yesterday, there was a reporter, I think it's a Denver Broncos former player by the name of Ryan Harris, who came out and he said that he has heard reports. Obviously, a lot of this spiraled from the Matt Lombardo report from FanSided earlier this month, where he said Trey Lance has continually underwhelmed. Obviously, everything requires context. You go into the Lombardo podcast. Right after that, you see that Lombardo talks about last training camp when Trey Lance is getting his first snaps of football, and really in over a year, right? He took off the 2020 season because of COVID, only one game played. So that's expected in a way where you're kind of getting acclimated. We all obviously hear the great reports from Kyle Shanahan and company, but then Ryan Harris comes out and says two things. He first talks about the arm fitness, and then he also talks about the Trey Lance not ready portion as well. Arm fitness, Ryan Harris clarified, talking about fatigue, essentially, that Lance's arm is essentially fatigued, and that's something the 49ers are somewhat concerned about, because obviously over a 48 game or 60-minute stretch, you're throwing the football a good amount, and that could contribute to fatigue. So that's where the arm fitness thing came from. Obviously, a lot of people were quick to dispute it, seeing the work ethic that Trey Lance has displayed. Harris also mentioned, I will say that Harris did mention that particular trait can be fixed through an offseason program, an offseason regimen. So we will see. I mean, we haven't really seen Trey Lance much, so we don't know if fatigue is true or not, but we will see an accurate analysis this season.
It just feels weird because I don't remember a quarterback being drafted top 3. I mean, it's not even we're talking a guy of 4 or 5. This is a top 3 quarterback, right? That has been as disrespected as this guy. I was guilty of it. Don't get me wrong. I wanted Justin Fields. He was my guy, right? Because I was convinced that Trey Lance needed a year. The 49ers were obviously convinced Trey Lance needed a year, so because he sat for a year. But it's weird to see, people continue to with this narrative that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start this year when, I mean, I don't have the ability to play the video clip here, But there's a video clip of Kyle Shanahan literally saying, Trey Lance is our starter. That's why we tried to cheat Jimmy this offseason. And it's like, so what's going on? Like, why is all this narrative stuff coming from? It just seems sort of weird. And I think there's some theories around it, and we'll talk about that. But like, what is your main theory to why this kid is so disrespected?
Right. So, I mean, I have a couple of things. I wanted to first point out something that I heard earlier today in the spaces, and I actually thought it made a ton of sense. When you look
Mhm.
at the other quarterbacks, it was a stacked quarterback class, at least coming out of the draft, right? You had five quarterbacks selected in the top 15, three quarterbacks in a row from 1 through 3, and then obviously Justin Fields at 11 and Mac Jones at 15. All four of those other quarterbacks played a significant amount in their rookie years, not to mention Davis Mills, who was selected in the third round, who also played a significant amount. And when you play a significant amount, there's at least some picture of how you fare in the NFL level out there. So all of those quarterbacks, all of those other five, have faced somewhat of their criticisms, right, going into the year or going into this offseason, right? Justin Fields holds on to the ball too long, which resulted in a ton of sacks. His arm talent, while the arm strength is there are questions about his mechanics and things like that. Trevor Lawrence, they like all of these guys had certain questions, and obviously there are excuses for every single quarterback. However, Trey Lance was the one unknown. Chris Sims alluded to it yesterday. He's the hardest quarterback to grade out of this class so far because you only have 2.5 games of film on him. So really, there's not necessarily an accurate depiction of what Trey Lance is going to be at the NFL level. And so when you look at it for Trey Lance's perspective, I think it's a ton of media smoke because there's not enough criticism in a way out there for Trey Lance because he just didn't play enough for you to say anything negative about him. So I think this is just that kind of portion of the criticism going out there that other quarterbacks have probably seen as they played last season. And it does seem a little obviously calculated because the 49ers Twitter were one of the best with clicks. Well, if something pops up, we're right on it. Everybody will see it. We're notorious for that. And then obviously this is the dead part of the offseason, not much information going on. So there are theories around that, but that's kind of like my main analysis from it.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say hello to 49ers Breakdown and also 49ers Throwback. How you guys doing? Thanks for coming in. I think it's kind of interesting because I don't claim to be like a quarterback expert or anything like that. Like, but I feel like as someone who watches football, knows a good amount about football, understands the sport, understands the way it's played, you know, people talked a lot of smack about the way that the Arizona Cardinals game went. And I think that a lot of it was misplaced because I think that if you look at the throws that Trey Lance was making for a rookie, some of those throws were, I mean, the last quarterback to make those kind of throws was Kaepernick. And I don't even know if Kaepernick can make those kind of throws. And yes, you can talk about how he was forced to run the ball and all that stuff. And, that is whatever. I don't know if that was Kyle just not trusting his arm. But when this kid throws, the talent is there. I think anyone with a brain can see it, right? And so even Mahomes, Allen, like who are, 1, 2, or 3, Rodgers is still up there, some of the best quarterbacks in the world, they have bad throws. Like the NFL is a more of a percentages game than it is always 100% amazing all the time. And I feel like when I watch Trey Lance, I see him getting better. Like you said, only 2.5 games. But I felt like every single game I saw noticeable, like him getting better and understanding his pass, understanding his protections, understanding where to go with the ball, understanding the people he's throwing the ball to, because these are not, D2 players. These are Debo freaking Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, who are, premier wide receivers in the league. And it just feels like the progression I saw last year, if I see that again this year, then I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they can make a run. And so I don't know where the hate comes from, because there was times where Zach Wilson looked like the worst quarterback ever drafted, but people have him above Trey Lance in almost every single, grading or whatever of these teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm like, I'll be honest, I don't care right now about any quarterback rankings for the second year players. If you want to put Trey Lance at the 31 spot, I'm fine with it just because of the games played. I honestly think you can't rank Trey Lance right now at any spot just because you don't have an accurate depiction of how Trey Lance is going to fare at the NFL level. You've seen him play in 2.5 games. One where he was still recovering. I mean, the first 2 games, he was still recovering from a thumb injury that he sustained over there in the preseason. limiting his range of motion during his throws, and that could have probably led to some of the inaccuracies. He goes 9 of 18 in his first game against Seattle, 157 yards. Obviously, the main pass was that 75-yard Deebo Samuel touchdown, and then only 15 of 29 against Arizona. But then when you see his first game healthy, he throws 16 to 23. And if you're talking about accuracy, right? I know his overall accuracy for the year was 58%, but accuracy wise, that game, 69.5% accuracy wise, I mean, that's what you want from a quarterback. So when you see the progression like you're talking about, it's important that you have it. And like 49ers breakdown says, there's a ton of anomalies. Peyton Manning had one of the worst rookie seasons of all time. There are good players that have had terrible rookie seasons. There are bad players that have had good rookie seasons, right? So there's a mixture, which is why it takes a while to analyze these quarterbacks. But obviously, most important position in football, Trey Lance currently is the only quarterback, in my opinion, out of the group that is in a position to make the playoffs in 2022. And so I think there's just going to be an increased scrutiny on him until the situation gets resolved. We both, I think, expect that Garoppolo will be moved before the season starts. I think a lot of that talk will simmer down once there's an actual solution on the board, which has likely been talked about behind the scenes.
I think someone said it best. I saw something on Twitter the other day that was like, once Garoppolo is healthy, I suspect he'll probably request a trade or he'll, ask to get out because he doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to just sit here and watch Trey Lance be the starter. We all know that Jimmy doesn't want to be here. He hasn't wanted to be here, and that's fine. He can go do some Subway ads because he seems to be getting more and more of those. Have you seen the one now where he decides to take a sandwich and crunch it in half and eat it? That's weird. It's really weird, but that's besides the point. So, I mean, the thing is the one factor I've really thought about a lot, and you can tell me what you think of this, Rohan, is usually when quarterbacks get drafted into a team, they're drafted to a team because they're awful. They're downright terrible. There's a few times where guys have been drafted in the top 10 and have been, they've traded down, but rarely ever does a team that is a Super Bowl contender, NFC champion runner-up, team that has been a perennial contender almost every single year except for the years their quarterback's been hurt, trade to 3 and go get a quarterback. And so I don't know what it is if it's this. The NFL gets it wrong. I think people forget that the NFL is not always right. And I don't know if it's this weird misconception. They're like, well, they got to the Super Bowl with Jimmy. What makes you think that Trey is better than Jimmy? And it's I don't know if people are even looking at the talent this kid possesses and what he can do with the football. They're more just looking at the fact that, hey, this team went to the Super Bowl, Jimmy Garoppolo. What makes you think they're going to go to the Super Bowl with this kid? Everyone thinks that you have to build back up from the ground up, even though me and you as 49er fans, as people who follow this team, who talk about this team on Twitter all the time, know how good this roster is. Like, a lot of us walked away from the draft being like, well, we didn't draft a ton of impact players because this is a good football team who just need to replenish. And they've shown they know how to replenish properly and accurately. And so I just feel like if Trey Lance is just Jimmy Garoppolo his first year, they're fine with that. It's that he needs to continue to get better every single year.
Right. And I mean, I'll just bring up 2 test cases, right? Where as a quarterback's play is important, but not necessarily always indicative of the team's success. Back in 2018, Lamar Jackson started 7 games for those Baltimore Ravens. And Lamar Jackson is a great quarterback, don't get me wrong. But in his rookie year, he did struggle with accuracy, only threw 58.2% of completed passes, 6-3 touchdown to interception ratio. It wasn't as big of a prolific offense from the quarterback standpoint. Still isn't necessarily their run first team. But the Ravens won 6 of the 7 games that Lamar Jackson started just because of the overall team around them. And when you look at it, there's a reason the Ravens were picking 32nd, they were technically picking 25th, but there's a reason for that. Good teams know how to supplant these rookie quarterbacks and implement them into their offenses, which is why you see a lot of these quarterbacks, in a way, fare better in the mid to late first round. Patrick Mahomes was on a team that traded up from 27 to 10, right, to get him. And then the other test case that I want to bring up, Josh Allen. In his second year in the NFL, he only threw for 58.8% of completed passes, 29.9 touchdown interception ratio. So fairly good, right? But still, the accuracy was a major concern. Buffalo makes the playoffs. So really, the point that I'm trying to make here is with the roster that the 49ers have, you don't need substantial quarterback play to make the playoffs at least. We've seen it over 2 years. Garoppolo threw for 3,800 yards last year and only 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. That's less than a 2-to-1 ratio than I just illustrated with these two other guys. And we made the playoffs to the NFC Championship game. 2019, Garoppolo had a 27-13 touchdown to interception ratio. So, when you look at it, it's like it isn't necessarily a formula where the quarterback is necessary. However, when you want to reach that second hump, that's where the quarterback is needed, where you see great quarterbacks make the Super Bowl. And that's where Trey Lance kind of factors into the equation. And so to me, I'm not looking for anything super special from Trey Lance in year one. If you can post average quarterback numbers like Garoppolo did this past season, you're going to be fine because the 49ers roster is good enough to the point where it can take them further in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is the 49ers are just, they're not the Jets, And I think that's the thing that people don't seem to be understanding outside of 49er land, because, we're seeing top 10 lists, now that the draft's over, now the free agency's pretty much over. We're seeing top 10 lists, and the 49ers are always 8, 9, or 10. Every single one, right? I've seen one where they were 7, I think, but like 8, 9, or 10. And when you're 8, 9, or 10, it means you're doing something right. And if you're 8, 9, and 10, even with a rookie quarterback, and people don't even really know what that rookie quarterback is, if this rookie quarterback ends up being, and I said on Twitter the other night after the Warriors just manhandled the Dallas Mavericks. So if you're a Dallas Maverick fan, I'm sorry, you're probably going to continue to get manhandled because they can't do anything against this team. But the Warriors went on a run because the Warriors continued to build around their core. And the 49ers have done that. The 49ers have their core superstars, and they've continued to build around it and get better. And so now the 49ers have realized they need to replace quarterback. They've replaced the quarterback, and they're still just as talented around them. And so it's just like, I feel like if they can, if he is a top 7 quarterback, not saying top 5, doesn't have to be top 3, top 7, with the team they have and the way they've continued to build around him, they're going to compete for Super Bowls every single year, or at least be in the playoffs every single year, to the point where at any point they could get to the NFC Championship. At any point, they might be able to win the NFC Championship game. And that's what you want from your football team. That's what the Patriots did, except they won every single time they went. The Seahawks had the potential to do that. They had a defense. They had core around these guys, and they wasted it. So I just pray that the 49ers do not waste Trey Lance, because if this kid is what we all think he is, I don't think anybody's going to ever argue on Twitter again about quarterback, just because it's if you're winning games, I don't think you can complain.
Exactly. And on Tuesday, I did an exercise with Jesse Naylor of Last Second Sports, just evaluating the 49ers roster. And almost every position group, there were only 3 position groups in the entirety of the team that we thought didn't improve this offseason, meaning they stayed the same or got worse. And that was the offensive line, the safety position, and then the tight end position. The first 2 getting worse, and then the tight end position remaining the same. But every other position group, despite a team with a ton of top-tier talent, blue chip talent per se, with a ton of top tier contracts, to be honest, they still found a way to improve. At the running back position, they added 1 in the draft. At wide receiver, they added 1 in the draft, 1 in free agency, and a multitude of players to compete for that 6th spot. At the fullback, you still have Kyle Juszczyk, but at defensive line, you draft Drake Jackson, right? You add Kamoko Toure to offset the loss of Arden Key, and then essentially it's a 1-for-1 swap with Javon Kinlaw and the guy we lost in DJ Jones, but the main pieces are still there. It's essentially building around your core, just like you said, but adding extra talent around it. And I think that that's the important part for the 49ers. It's just that you continue to add the complementary pieces that push you from here to here. And so that's what I think the 49ers did this offseason. I think the offseason was honestly successful. Despite the Garoppolo saga, despite the Deebo Samuel dispute, I think the overall offseason was like, at least in the focus towards Trey Lance, this offseason was successful. And that's what you kind of want to do. Now, the expectation, right? I mean, if Garoppolo requests his release, beautiful. That solves that situation for us, right? In a way. But essentially, we've built a way that we move forward with Trey Lance. And one stat that I keep pushing to, the last 5 Super Bowls, every one of those Super Bowls, at least one of the teams had a quarterback on their rookie contract, meaning the formula for going to the Super Bowl or even winning Super Bowls are teams with rookie contracts at the quarterback position, because it's so important to load the talent outside of the quarterback position. When you get that second contract, that bigger contract, it obviously hinders your roster building. And so that's what I think is important. When you look at it, right, 2017, the Eagles had Carson Wentz. Obviously, he was injured, but he was the majority of the reason why they were there. In 2018, the Rams have Jared Goff. 19 and 20, Patrick Mahomes was there. In 21, it was Joe Burrow. That's the recipe in a way, and the 49ers have started it. Now they have to just finish it by letting Trey Lance play through his growing pains.
Yeah, I think that not only that, first I'll say what's up to Joey Arenado. What's up, dude? The 49ers have shown that they know how to build the ability for the teams to compete. And what I really love about the situation with, drafting Danny Gray and the fact that they spent all those, those draft picks on getting guys, or not draft picks, I'm sorry. They spent all that free agency money on getting guys just to compete, because those guys might not make the team. But if they can make the rest of the team better, I think that helps the 49ers, because you're literally whittling it down to, the best of the best of the best on a team that plays in a division that can potentially do anything at any time, right? Real quick, you got a question right here.
Nope.
Rohan, are you going to Chicago week 1?
I actually am expecting to go to Chicago week 1. That is one of the games that I do plan to be there this year.
Well, go to the Rohan Chakravarthi meetup. See, I got it right that time.
Yes, sir.
I just forgot to look at it beforehand. That was my fault. And then we got Raphael, 562 Niners. What's up, Nate, Rohan, everyone in the...
Thank you for tuning in.
Of course, 49ers minded. What's up, homies? I'm trying to get better at this, Rohan. I'm still learning the YouTube way. Podcasting, I don't have to do this, but I'm trying to get better at actually saying hello to people, so they don't just come in but nobody's saying hello to me and leave. But
yeah, the chat is always amazing. It's dope that everyone gets to show up and just support and talk some 49ers really at 8:30
exactly
night.
But so what I'm most excited for as a 49er fan, I think, is that we're looking at a roster that's going to be competitions everywhere during training camp. It's going to be a lot of fun, because you're going to have corners battling it out. You're going to have running backs battling it out. You're going to have, defensive linemen battling out, defensive ends, guys who want to be the D forward role. Offensive linemen are going to be battling. It's just, I think that's a lot of fun. I think that's really good for a team, because I think the NFL, nothing's promised, it stands for not for long. And I think that none of these guys should be okay, I'm definitely making the team just because I got drafted. No, it should be you have to work your ass off and show the coach that you're there to be great in order to make a football team. And so the 49ers understand that better than anybody, because they've done it every single year. Even to the point where some of that, what was his name? Trent Sherfield made the team because he was just the best in training camp. So I'm hoping, we see that kind of battle.
Yeah, I definitely want it, and I think we're definitely going to be granted that, right? Lynch already alluded to one of them, the slot cornerback spot, where he said it's going to be an open competition. We have a ton of bodies. We definitely did a good job adding the amount of depth to this roster on top of our deep end talent, where we can see it's not only who competes for a roster spot, but who competes for the higher roster spot, alluding obviously to Trent Sherfield, who got the third wide receiver spot to start the year last year over Brandon Ayuk, because Brandon Ayuk was coming back from injury, and obviously all the doghouse stuff that people were talking about. So it is definitely fun to see training camp battles, and I think that they will certainly be highlighted this year.
Yeah, I think that I'm excited. I think I'm most excited to find out what the 49ers offensive line is going to be going forward. I think that that's super exciting. I think that I really hope that, Aaron Banks turns out to be, how cool would it be, Rohan, if Aaron Banks gets out there in that first preseason game and just bulldozes someone, and everyone's like, oh my God, we talked so much shit for nothing.
That'd be crazy. Obviously, the thing that I always stress about these players, right, is I don't want to say anything about them until we know what they are. So right now, they're not bad, they're not good, they're just unknowns. And so obviously, when you talk about unknowns, you can't definitively say that that unknown player is better than the current starter that you had. Meaning, Aaron Banks is likely not better than Laken Tomlinson, because if that was the case, Aaron Banks would have started last year, right? That's kind of what I mean by that. But obviously, the potential is there for certain players, and when a lot of the work happens behind the scenes, you don't necessarily know how they're going to fare out. And so, obviously, moving on from Tomlinson, uh, seems like the 49ers are comfortable with Aaron Banks. And that's a guy who a lot of people kind of like now brush off to the side because they feel that he's just a locked starter over there at left guard. So I'm definitely interested to see how does he perform in that role.
Let's answer a quick question and then we'll get on to the schedule. Joey Arnaudo wants to know, how are we feeling about some of the UDFAs making the roster? So, I mean, I think the defensive line guys will make the roster. I think that they've shown that these guys generally make the roster because they love having the ability on third down to have their real, high quality starters come out. And then on second down, be able to switch in a guy to rest Nick Bosa for a play and then bring those guys back out, when the time matters. And I think that those are the guys who I think will make it. I don't think any of those wide receivers are going to make it. I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, so for my guys, I think the top guys that are going to make it, I mean, I think Donovan West is a lock, got a 100K guaranteed, 10K signing bonus, uncharacteristic really for one of those undrafted free agents. So I think he's a lock to make it. I honestly think Jason Poe should make it as well. That'd probably bring the group up to 8, 9 players because
we're
of the
talking about my bad. We're talking about the drafted guys. My bad. I was thinking of the free agents. I'm stupid. I'm sorry. My head is kind of everywhere from the car accident.
That's fine.
You're good. Continue. My bad. I'm sorry, guys.
But
sorry.
Defensively, so those two guys I'm thinking about undrafted wise offensively. The wide receivers, it'll be interesting to see if one of them make it, because I think Taysier Mack has some obviously some potential, and it's really that sixth wide receiver spot. You got 5 guys that are locked. That's Samuel, Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod, and then Danny Gray, right? Those are the 5 guys that are locked on the roster. That 6th spot is up to a slew of veterans and undrafted guys. Malik Turner, Marcus Johnson, who was a special teams guy for Indianapolis last year. Then guys like Taysier Mack, and there are different, a couple of different undrafted free agents that could definitely make it over there. Tay Martin, in addition, out of Oklahoma State, I think his chances are pretty high to make the roster if he can outperform these guys in training camp. So I think it'll boil down to one of those guys, right, for that 6th spot. So it'd be interesting to see if one of those guys make it. I want to just throw out a dark horse in a way. That's Jeremiah Gemmel, the UNC linebacker, who I thought was a pretty good guy. And I just don't know if he's going to make it if the 49ers try and put him on the practice squad. They tried it with Justin Hilliard last year. He got claimed by the New York Giants. I don't know if, especially given that it's DeMeco Ryans' strong suit, if they're trying to keep him around, other teams might notice that. They're like, okay, we want to get that guy. And so I wonder, will they trade one of their 5 linebackers that they currently have? Obviously, Burks won't be traded, but could they trade Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles if there's interest? Could they trade Dre Greenlaw if there's interest, and potentially slide Jeremiah Gemmel, a guy with good instinct and pretty good range despite his speed? He's got pretty good range and pretty good size at the linebacker position. So I think that he could just be a sub-package guy. So I do like him, the intrigue of him, especially as a special teamer for year one. If not, I think he should definitely deserve a practice squad spot. What about you?
Now that I actually know the question, I think Poe is going to make the team for sure. I really do. I think that the tackle, I'm drawing blank on names. I can't think of his name right now. Donovan West, I think, right? I think that's the name of the tackle.
West is the center guy.
I think the offensive lineman will make it. Those are the guys. The question I actually wanted to ask you is I had a question for you, and that's Leon O'Neal. I think a lot of people talk about him first, but first I want to say what's up to Jesse Last Second Sports, and what's up to Jamal Armstrong. What's up, guys? Thanks for coming in. But you hear so much about Leon O'Neal, right? Like people keep talking about him because we need safety depth. That kid is so slow, and I hope he's working his ass off, and I get he's probably trying real hard. I'd love to know, do you think he has any chance of making this team?
I'll say no to the team, yes to the 50 or to the practice squad for one stipulation. And that's that. I see 49ers breakdown talking about Quantrez Knight. I actually think he might be the better player for the 49ers specifically going into this year. So if you're looking at a safety that might try and make it, Quantrez Knight might be that guy. I forget exactly where he's from. It might be UCF. I'm forgetting the school off the top of my head, but he's a guy because he provides the coverage ability at least that you want opposite of Jimmy Ward. You want a coverage safety out there. You already have Hufanga. You already have George Odom, who you just signed. Both the guys who are pretty good tacklers. You want the coverage safety, and if Tarvarius Moore isn't that answer, then you probably look to get a guy like Quantrez Knight. At the moment, it just seems like Tarvarius Moore is the answer. Hence why they didn't go after the position in free agency. Hence why they didn't draft a player at the position also. But to me, I just don't think Leon O'Neal fits this team. You have that type of build in Hufanga, who you invested a 6th-round pick in last year, and you also have George Odom, who you paid a significant amount of money for a special teams type of player to. So I just don't think O'Neal makes it. I don't think his build is best for the 49ers in the role that they envision their safeties for. He's too slow, like you said. I do like the chance that he can make plays and stuff like that. But how does that translate to the NFL level with a live defense? I'm not exactly sure. However, I will say this. I would love for the 49ers to potentially translate him to a linebacker on the practice squad for a year, similar to how they did with Marcel Harris. Obviously, he doesn't have Marcel Harris's speed, but he's got better instinct than Marcel Harris. I think he's got to get to angles better, and I think his range would be better utilized in a linebacker role compared to the safety role just because of the lack of depth compared to a safety role.
Yeah.
I think that's a place where he can better use his instincts. Obviously, he's a smaller guy. He'd have to make it work, which is why you stack him on the practice squad. But that's kind of the role that I envision of him for 2022. And then if he improves, maybe eclipse him over one of the veteran linebackers in 2023.
I love how, we talk to anyone about these undrafted free agents, and I 100% agree with everybody who says it. It is, everyone loves Jason Poe and everyone loves Donovan West. Like, those are the two guys that everyone absolutely loves, and the rest of the guys are like, I mean, people want O'Neal to be great, right? Everyone is totally into, Leon O'Neal being great, but he maybe just doesn't fit the 49ers. But they have shown, like you just said, I actually haven't heard anyone say that yet. The fact that they could move him to linebacker like Marcel Harris and, he could see success doing that, I think that would be great for the 49ers.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there are a couple of others like this as safety wise. I think Taylor Hawkins out of San Diego State and then Quantrez Knight. It's not UCF, I believe it's UCLA. I think those two guys provide a little more intrigue potentially at safety because they have safety nickel flexibility in a way. I do want to bring up one name because I did hear a little bit of buzz obviously coming out of rookie minicamp, and that is Jordan Mason, the running back. And the 49ers obviously are a team that loves their running backs. Jordan Mason coming out of Georgia Tech, he had pretty good hands according to the people that were there at the rookie minicamp. And obviously it's a small sample size, but the 49ers have lacked a third down back for the last couple of years in the Shanahan era, be it because of the lack of talent at that position or because Shanahan doesn't utilize that position as much. However, I do think the position will be more utilized in 2022 just because Anthony Lynn is there. When you look at what Anthony Lynn's done, go to Los Angeles. Austin Eckler, one of the bigger type of guys in terms of production at the receiver, as a receiver from the backfield. Melvin Gordon even had some production over there in Los Angeles. You look last year, DeAndre Swift breaks out from a running back to a hybrid type of role where he was, I think, one of the top 5 guys in receptions as a running back last year. So that's the role Anthony Lynn envisions in this kind of offense. And I think right now there isn't necessarily a clear-cut front runner. Jeff Wilson might be that guy, but there isn't a clear-cut front runner for that role. Jordan Mason provides you some fresh legs in a way, and a guy who could potentially contribute as a third down back. Obviously, I don't think JaMychal Hasty makes this roster, and who knows? Jordan Mason could push for either a 53-man spot or a practice squad spot.
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously see. It's just kind of crazy to draft a running back as high as they did, and then if this kid ends up being better than the guy they drafted in the 3rd round, people are going to lose it. So it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. It's like, hey, cool, we got a running back on a real cheap contract. Oh, but we spent a 3rd round pick on this guy, and he's not as good as that guy. And it's like, oh, God, here we go again. But we'll obviously see, in training camp and stuff. But I'm not too worried about the 49ers finding ways to score with the weapons they have on this team. And I think that the offensive line will get figured out. Even when it was a really, it was a more poor offensive line, it was still better than a lot of the offensive lines in the league. They just had a quarterback who stood there with like a statue, like the famous Grant thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just standing like an idiot. And so I'm hoping, they have figured out how to make this offensive line talented. I honestly, every day I'm rooting for this man, Aaron Banks, just go out there and maul someone because there's just so many people who doubt him.
Oh yeah, I definitely want that for sure. Just everyone who got doubted on this team, even if it's Leon O'Neal, everyone who got doubted, just go out there and show those doubters up, please.
And then let's talk about one more position on the roster, and then we'll get to the schedule. We'll just talk about the schedule a little bit. I know I'm a week late. Don't give me shit about it. I get it. It's been a weird week for me. I want to talk to you about center. Obviously we had that weird scare where Brad posted, that Alex Mack was in the office and turned out to be Brunskill. I know I've talked to you about Alex Mack personally a lot. And so, what is your thoughts on the Alex Mack situation? Where do you think the 49ers will end up, come season? And do you think that he's taking this long to announce a retirement, or do you think he's coming back?
I think the 49ers know already what Alex Mack is doing. I think he informed them prior to the draft. Obviously, we're going to get a definite answer in literally 4 days. OTAs begins on the 23rd. You expect Alex Mack in the building, if that's the case. If not, you expect them to the retirement in a way to be announced during that day. I think, though, that at least at this point, because it's gotten this far, obviously it's hard to say, right? Because it's gotten this far, so you might say no news isn't great because normally you'd like to see some sort of workout clip or something like that. But also with just the way the 49ers have operated at the center position, I think Alex Mack is coming back for a final season, which would be absolutely beneficial for this room because then Daniel Brunskill stays at the spot that he had some consistency with last year at right guard, rather than having to move him once more on the offensive line. Because I understand the value of versatile guys, but I think it's also very important for the guys to have a specific spot where they play at. You saw Aaron Banks somewhat struggle early on when he had to move to right guard instead going back to his original position of left guard. This year is expected. So I think the offensive line is actually going to return 4 starters from last year, which is crazy to say given the amount of uncertainty that we had in this offensive line and the amount of criticism that people had for this offensive line going into the offseason. And this unit was a top 10 unit last year. Obviously, you replaced Laken Tomlinson with Aaron Banks, but I think it's still expected to be a top 10, top 12 unit in the NFL still this year with Alex Mack in. I think that'd be super beneficial because Donovan West gets to learn from Alex Mack for a year.
Yeah.
He's also alluded that he'd prefer to learn from Alex Mack. But if not, you have an open competition at center. You've got West, you've got Poe, you got Nick Zakelj, and then you also have Brunskill. So I think the 49ers are equipped both ways, as well as the free agent over there sitting on the streets in J.C. Treader. So I think they're well equipped in both ways to combat the situation. At the moment, I'll say I believe Alex Mack is coming back. However, I would not be surprised at all if that decision changes and he's there on Monday.
Yeah, I think I think he's coming back. I think that the 49ers would have drafted a center higher if they had a real doubt that he was coming back. And I think the 49ers have always been really good at that. When guys leave who are important pieces, they try to replace them right away. Buckner leaves, and we know we have DJ Jones, but they still replace him with Kinlaw, thinking, hey, we should use a high round pick on Kinlaw, replace him, and so we can continue having the production we have here. But I do think he's coming back. I think they're going to get one more year out of Alex Mack, and I think that eventually they will have their replacement next year. But we'll obviously see 4 days. That's the thing. In the 4 days, everyone's going to have a show. Everyone's going to be talking about this stuff, right? So,
yeah.
Let's talk about the schedule. I know I'm very late. I always want to talk to you about this schedule. I think that it's actually really favorable for the 49ers. I think a lot of people are talking about it being like, oh my God, it's one of the hardest strength of schedule. But any year, and I think it was David Lichty, who was on the show last time I did one, he said, any year where you play 4 games against some of the worst teams in the NFL is a good year. And so the 49ers play 4 games against what are probably going to be the 3 worst teams in the NFL. The Seattle Seahawks, the Carolina Panthers, and the Atlanta Falcons. All 3 of those teams are terrible, and you get to play them for 4 games. That's 4 wins right there. And you're not like some scrub off off the curb team. This is a good football team who should go into Seattle and go into Carolina, or I think they play Carolina away.
I think
But go into
Carolina away, but yeah, they still have that 2-game stretch where they play Carolina and Atlanta at the same time.
But they one thing the 49ers have done in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era is they've been really good at staying on the other side of the country and finding a way to win both games before they come back home. Mm-hmm. And so
that's that game coming home, but the 2 games that they play on the road, they're pretty good at. Yeah.
I mean, and the game coming home is Kansas City, and I don't expect them to beat Patrick Mahomes unless Trey Lance is just on MVP course already, So, but let's go over the individual games for the remainder of the show. Just kind of look at them, through a different lens. And, I know everyone has done their schedule takes. We don't have to actually do what we think the 49ers, their final record. But I just like to talk about each of these games, and how the 49ers will be tackling them. The first game, Chicago. They shouldn't be good. I mean, what are you thinking when you think about this game? Justin Fields is on year 2. We talked about earlier how we think he holds the ball too long, and that's been a problem for him. But this team, when you think about it, I think they drafted Velus Jones.
Yeah,
is that what his name is?
Out of Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah, I like him, but I think that their wide receiving core is still pretty, terrible. And their offensive line was one of the worst in the league last year. And their defense is okay, but let's be honest here, nobody's afraid to go play the Chicago Bears because they think their defense is going to murder them without Khalil Mack. So, I mean, what do you think about when you think about the Chicago Bears?
Normally when you see these rebuilding teams, you expect them to get better year after year. And surprisingly, I think the Chicago Bears are one of the worst, one of the teams that actually got worse during their rebuild. They lost their 2 best players on either side. Allen Robinson left for the Los Angeles Rams, and then Khalil Mack, like you said, got traded. So, I mean, this team is worse and they're aging. Not only that, I don't think that they have Akeem Hicks anymore. So really, a lot of that leadership and a lot of that talent is gone from that defensive line. And when you look at last year's game, right? Justin Fields was somewhat of a problem for the 49ers. We won that game 30-22. Jimmy Garoppolo played pretty well, but really Deebo Samuel saved our season with the 83-yard touchdown. But when you look at it, Justin Fields and his mobility gave us problems. So I'm very interested, game 1, how does DeMeco Ryans start the year off against these mobile quarterbacks? Because we're going to face a good amount of them this year, right? I mean, you talked about one of them in Kansas City. He's not that mobile, but he can move in Patrick Mahomes.
I mean, he has a cannon for an arm, and he is the best quarterback in the league. So
exactly. Then, I mean, we've got Russell Wilson in week 3, who we've had obviously struggles against. Marcus Mariota later on in the year. We have a number of these guys, while obviously playing Kyler Murray twice. So I want to see, how does he start the year against mobile quarterbacks? That's the main question I have.
Absolutely.
Because this Bears team, we shouldn't win. And even if our offense doesn't necessarily be prolific, I do expect the defense to carry in a way, just because of the lack of talent. And I think this is a good buildup for the 49ers. The 49ers defensive line should feast on this offensive line that really didn't improve from a year ago. And the offensive line wasn't good a year ago for the Chicago Bears. Defensively, I think this is a good start for Trey Lance. You aren't necessarily going to see a ton of pressure from the group that they have right now. Robert Quinn is really the main threat that they have right now. And so I think that this is definitely a good thing for Trey Lance, because I feel like he's going to have a good amount of time, but also he's got to be a little smart with his decision making, because in the cornerback room over there, you've got Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, and Eddie Jackson, who might possess somewhat of a challenge. So I like the challenge for Trey Lance. I do expect this to be a win, but I think that, the main question that I have is the DeMeco Ryans question.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's the thing, is to go against a mobile quarterback for week 1 kind of shows who this team is, and that's the thing. Moving on to the next game, we're playing a Seattle Seahawks team with nothing. Literally, like, what scares you about the Seattle Seahawks? If you had to name one thing that scares you about the Seattle Seahawks, what would you say? Because I struggle to name one thing about the Seattle Seahawks that scares me. And if anything, it's that stupid stadium where they scream a bunch, but they're going to be so bad, they're only going to have 12 fans in the whole stadium. And so, I mean, if I have to name one thing, it's Tyler Lockett finding the way to get the ball on, like, Drew Lock. Or did you see the report? I'm so happy I have you here, Rohan. Did you see the report that said Geno Smith is currently edging out Drew Lock?
Oh my God, Geno
What
Smith,
is going on?
5 years after flunking in New York, is about to get a start, another start. He's going to be the starting quarterback of a football team right now. Like,
and they said, Pete Carroll said he didn't want the kid from Liberty. Didn't want him. Just didn't think he was ready for the NFL. Like, you're starting Geno Smith.
He was writing Drew Lock's praises during this draft process. And so it's super funny that right after the draft ends, you see that Geno Smith is likely going to be the starter.
So we're going to kill them. So if I'm a Niner fan, I'm going to tell everyone who's listening, everyone who's checking out this show, go to the Seahawks game, because you're going to watch something we have not seen in something like 8 years. They're going to murder these dudes. They're going to send these dudes back to Seattle to go sit in their stupid rainy city for another couple games before they go to their stupid rainy city and beat their ass again. Like, I just love it so much. I'm so happy they're bad. The day they traded Russell Wilson, I cried happy tears. You know the long it's been since I cried happy tears? Oh my God. I'm so happy.
This is wonderful. But speaking like real about what necessarily scares me about the Seattle game, it's our first test for the run game. I don't think Chicago's run game is going to be as good as this one. This one ran for 5 yards per carry last year. Obviously, with a better offensive line, they lose Dwayne Brown, their best offensive lineman, to free agency this year, starting fresh. So I don't necessarily think that it will be as prolific as it was. Our run game was the best from week 8 to the end of the season when Arik Armstead slid inside. I want to see that continuity with this game, which is essentially our first challenge. However, like Geno Smith, Drew Lock do not scare me at the quarterback position. Like, if you thought anything could eliminate the two receivers they have, it's not any cornerback in the league. It's their own quarterback. Like, they're about to turn into the new Odell Beckham. DK Metcalf's dad is about to post a video on Instagram of Geno Smith and Drew Lock missing DK Metcalf every single time down the field. So, yeah, I do expect this one to be a pretty easy one. Obviously, nothing's easy in the NFL, but a game where the 49ers should be heavily favored because the Seattle defense, especially after losing Wagner and the pass rushers that they lost this offseason, is not that good.
And I think that Kenneth Walker, they drafted him because I think that their starting running back is not going to be there. So Kenneth Walker is probably going to be their starting running back, which is pretty interesting for Pete Carroll to be like, all right, rookie guy, you're going out there. Although they still have Rashad Penny for some reason. God knows why they drafted that kid in the first round. I don't know. The Seattle Seahawks do stupid shit, and I don't think people understand how stupid it is now that Russell Wilson's gone. And speaking of Russell Wilson, this for me is so hard because I hate picking against the 49ers, but ever since Russell Wilson left Seattle, I've had this little soft spot in my heart for him. I don't know if you've noticed my tweets. I love Russell Wilson. I really do. Just because, when was the last time you watched someone run around like an idiot and then throw the ball and it's a touchdown? It's the most impressive thing I've ever seen in person. And so now that he's not on the Seahawks, I can actually root for the guy. But here it is, week 3, we see him again, and it's in Denver on Sunday Night Football in that damn elevation. And so, I mean, this is my first loss of the year is to Russell Wilson, because this man is a god against the 49ers. He owns them. Like, and it sucks because I want to root for him because he's so goofy and so weird. And I'm like, he's not a Seahawk anymore. He's not a threat unless we play the Broncos in the Super Bowl. So, Mr. Unlimited, like, I'm going to root for him all year, but I'm rooting for him in this game, and I'm worried this is the game they lose.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is our first loss of the year. And, I mean, they're two good teams, right? This is the 49ers and the Denver Broncos' first test of the year. I think Denver plays Seattle and Houston in their first 2 weeks. The one thing that you said is the altitude. I think Denver's going to be a little more prepared for it because their second game of the year is against Houston at home, meaning they're going to spend 2 straight weeks with that altitude, be a little more prepared for it. And obviously, they spend their entire offseason preparing at that altitude as well. So I think they're just going to be a little more prepared. It's kind of like the first punch to the gut in a way for the 49ers. And this is like, it's interesting because the scenario is very similar to last year. You started off against two inferior opponents in a way last year as well. Going first game, that's a big test, is week 3, another primetime game, a Sunday night game where we faced Green Bay last year. It was a pretty good game until Garoppolo threw the ball or fumbled the ball behind, and then obviously we lost it in a way. We lose that game by 2, but I expect it to be a close battle. I just think Denver pulls out this one for sure.
And I think that them losing to Denver helps them with this next game because I think they're going to shit stomp the Rams. I really do. And I know people are like, this is a different Rams team. But the 49ers literally eat the Rams lunch in the season. I don't care who, when, what it is. It's going to be at home. They're going to come off of just losing to Russell Wilson again. And so I think that they're going to be like, yo, we are not losing back-to-back games to these bums in LA and their sunscreen and their sunny city with their stupid baseball team that fucking cheats. Sorry, that was me hating on the Dodgers. That's uncalled for. I'm sorry. But so I just think that they're going to come out and they're going to be hungry and they're going to beat the hell out of the Rams. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually have this game. I have the Rams splitting. I see a question in there.
I have a split too, yeah.
I have this game, the home game, being the win, and we'll talk about it a little later, but I do think the second game that we play against the Rams in LA, I do think we lose that one. But this one, I do think that the game right before this kind of prepares us, right? You face a tough team in the Denver Broncos right before this. It's your first test. You get reinvigorated, and you go back home to Levi's Stadium. I mean, obviously, Levi's hasn't been the best home crowd necessarily as of late. We just haven't played well there. But I do think that this will be a pretty defining win for us. And I think that, after beating Seattle and then a close game in Denver, I think this is a pretty resounding comeback in a way for the 49ers coming in and defeating the Rams to go in 3-1 in the division.
I think this is a huge win too because before this, the LA Rams have already played Buffalo and lost.
And they play Arizona, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that this could be a huge win to setting them up to win the division. I mean, if the 49ers win the division this year, do you know how mad NFL media is going to be? They can't continue to talk about how great Stafford is and now he's top 5. If I hear one more time that Matthew Stafford is a top 5 quarterback, I'm going to puke. The man is not top 5. He could be top 10. Fine.
He's number 6.
He could be 7. I mean, we can do that, Rohan. I can change the subject, but we're not going to do that today. Yeah. That's for Twitter Spaces. So, we talked about these games a little bit. Carolina, Atlanta, back-to-back away. They're wins. Those are bad football teams. Like, I hope Jimmy's on the Carolina Panthers so we can kick his ass too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we do win both of them, and normally, one of these games in a way is the trap game where you expect to win, but 2 road games, it's a different environment. It's also early in the season. You might expect to lose one, but I do think that surprisingly, going into week 6 with a rookie quarterback, we do end up 5-1.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% there with you, and I think that the problem is going to be the confidence after beating Carolina, beating Atlanta, and then the god of the NFL. Like, think about just god of the NFL. Patrick Mahomes comes into that building in Levi's, and he just goes the fuck off because that's what he does. There's nobody like Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to ever hear how Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the league. It is Patrick Mahomes. This man is a god. And I think that this is going to be a home game people are not going to want to go to because it might be close, but I just think that Trey Lance and the fact that he is a rookie quarterback is going to come out in that game because I think Mahomes is just, the guy just wins. Like, I can't explain it, man. He's just unbelievable. And for him to come into this building, after they win 2 games away, I just think that they'll probably lose.
Yeah, I do think this, and I think this is the tough stretch in a way, right before the homestand for the
Yeah.
49ers in the ensuing weeks. I think this next couple of weeks is the tough stretch for the 49ers. In a way, a reality check. The Chiefs obviously they're coming home. So it is tough for them. It's not just like it's a one-sided match. I don't expect this in a way to be a blowout, but I think that this is another test for our defense coming off two relatively easy opponents or relatively weakened or offensive opponents. The Chiefs, they have a game against Buffalo and Las Vegas and Tampa Bay. So they have a really, really tough. Honestly, their first 7 games are extremely tough. I remember. I saw a tweet. I think their first 7 or 8 games are all against opponents above 500. So they play a good amount of tough teams. But I think at this point, if they lose a couple of those early ones, they're going to be in that competitive playoff nature already, and they're going to bring that energy into Levi's. I think they win this one.
Yeah, I really think that the Chiefs this season is really integral for the Kansas City Chiefs because last year they should have beaten Joe Burrow. There's
Mm.
no reason they should have lost to Joe Burrow. And the fact is before they play the 49ers, they play Arizona, they play the LA Chargers, they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they play the Raiders, they play Buffalo, and then they play San Francisco. And if they lose to Buffalo week 6 and then have to come to San Francisco week 7, they're going to be pissed. And Mahomes is going to throw for, insane amount of yards no matter how good our defense is. So, I mean, this is a loss for me. And then I hate to say it, but I have the Rams game after that a loss too. Like, it sucks to see, to be talking about how San Francisco potentially lose 2 games in a row. But I think this is their 2 game in the row stretch and the only time they lose 2 in a row all season.
I don't know if that might be the only time I think that I have them that they lose 2 off all season, but I do think that this is also a loss for the 49ers. Leveling them out, they're 5-3 going into their break. I think these are 2 tough opponents.
Yeah.
The reason that I have this as a loss, the 49ers coming off a pretty grueling stretch here, two road games, and then coming back home facing a tough opponent, then going to Los Angeles, another
They're
tough
playing the world champs.
Rams.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the Rams, they're coming off their bye. They're rejuvenated, they're fresh. And I think that this is the way that they start their second half attack and take over the division in a way. And this is, I have them penciled in as a win for this one. Or sorry,
So
the
that we
Rams defending the 49ers. Yeah.
You're good. So then we go on a bye, and then we're back at home against Justin Herbert and the Chargers. I think the Chargers are good. I don't think the Chargers are as good as the NFL media thinks the Chargers are. I think they could potentially be a very good football team. I don't think they're going to be, near the top. I think Denver and Kansas City are in a league of their own in that division, personally.
Interesting. Okay. I do think I agree with you in that the Chargers definitely have the potential. The thing is, they have to had the potential for the last couple of years. It's just a couple of different factors, be it losing in close games, whatever it may be, have costed them playoff opportunities. I do think that the Chargers win this one as well. The 49ers lose 3 straight, which is somewhat
Damn.
uncharacteristic, coming off a bye week as well. But the Chargers, this is a tough game for the Chargers. They have their bye week in week 11. They're going 10 straight weeks of football. I just think their team, in a way, is outmatched. And the 49ers, they're going to have to face that mobile quarterback in a way again with Justin Herbert, but also have to balance that out with the deep field accuracy. It's somewhat of a prototype that Trey Lance might bring to a defense. Same way the 49ers have to encounter Justin Herbert, kind of like go with all levels of the field while also accounting for the run game. And so I think this team is pretty good. And the problem is for me, just because they're so deep on both sides of the ball, especially against the run, I think that the 49ers might not be able to dominate time of possession in this game. And that's a reason that I think the Chargers might pull out on top, dropping the 49ers to 5-4.
Damn. Everyone in the comments go after Rohan. Here's my thing about this stretch. You want the smoke? Here's the interesting thing about this stretch. So they play the Chargers. I keep thinking San Diego. I know it's LA. Then they play the Cardinals in Mexico. I think while this is an away game technically, this kind of feels like a 5-game home stretch in a way, for me at least. Like, I understand like you're traveling to Mexico, but it's not like the Cardinals are traveling, aren't traveling as well. Both teams are traveling. So, and I mean, I don't know a ton about Mexico, like when it comes to like who they root for when it comes to the NFL. But I would imagine, knowing the Hispanic people I know in the Bay Area, that there would be a lot more Niner fans in Mexico than Arizona Cardinal fans. Maybe I'm wrong. I know Arizona's closer, but I just know that generally most of my friends who are, of Hispanic descent generally like the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it from a couple of guys as well that I've talked to. And I think that this one is where the 49ers right the ship again. Another high altitude location in Arizona. But I think the 49ers do defeat the Arizona Cardinals. I think this last week, the game 10 week, or the week 10 week, was a bit of a preparation for Kyler Murray. And I think the 49ers, they lost to the Arizona Cardinals twice last year, looking for that sense of revenge. And unfortunately, DeAndre Hopkins and that entire wide receiver group will be there in that Week 11 matchup. But I think the 49ers match up well. They brought in Charvarius Ward for the sole purpose of being physical at the cornerback position and being able to defend multiple players. So now you have a guy that can eliminate the deep speed of Marquise Brown and the physicality of DeAndre Hopkins. And so that's what I liked about the addition of Charvarius Ward for that sole purpose. And I think that you definitely have a pretty solid matchup, fully out, because the defensive line, I think, trumps the Arizona offensive line, which is in a way one of their holes on their team when you look at the remainder of the roster. And at least last year, the problem with the 49ers was they couldn't defend the run against the Arizona Cardinals. But with this revamped defensive line, especially with the ton of depth that we have, I think that we're going to be able to eclipse that battle and somewhat dominate the game in terms of game pace, which will eventually lead us to a victory in this game.
And 49er Minded says there's a huge 49er fan base in Mexico. So
that's good to
I
know.
was right there.
Definitely good to know.
Here's two games that we can talk about the individual if you want, and we're running out of time. But I think these two teams are the definition of mid. The Saints and the Dolphins. Tua needs to perform this year. It's the most important year of his career. He has to perform. They went on and got him Tyreek Hill. The Saints, the defense is good, but what are you really afraid of on the offense? Because their starting quarterback is 30 for 30, Jameis Winston. I just think these are two mid teams the 49ers should be able to take care of pretty, fairly easy, especially because they're both at home.
Yeah, I think the Saints game should be a win. Obviously, when I just look at the schedule wise, right? Saints have a bye in week 14. A team where Jameis Winston, their starting quarterback, is coming off a long-term injury. You might have some concerns there. You wonder how that play will start to go over the course of 14 weeks without a bye. The 49ers obviously play them in week 12. I think that's to the 49ers' favor. And so they're just going to be the more rested and more rejuvenated team. And they're also playing at Levi Stadium. The Saints have a tough matchup like the 49ers, playing the Rams in New Orleans the week before. So they're doing cross-country travel. And so I do think that this is a little more favorable for the 49ers. Same with the Dolphins game, although I did highlight it in a way as one of those trap games as well. I think there are two on the schedule that I had as trap games. This was one of them, and the second one we'll get to in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think that both these games should be wins, right? I think they could potentially lose this game. Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, at home with that Bucs team. Obviously, I don't know what that Bucs team is going to be. They were very good last year. They weren't good enough to beat the Rams, but neither were we. But I think this could potentially be another loss, because I think the following week they go into Seattle and they murder their ass again. And that's why I think they can lose a game like this, because they know the following week they're going into Seattle to go, kill Geno Smith for a couple more quarters.
Yeah, this game is tough. Tampa Bay, they still do travel. They play New Orleans in 13 at home and then travel cross country, but you can't really doubt that roster. That's one of the more complete rosters in the entirety of the NFL. I think they're just deep all around. And even if it comes to a close game, there's no guy that you want to not face more than Tom Brady in those close games. I do think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pull this one out, because I think they might even be one of the top teams, if not the top seed in the entirety of the NFC West, given their schedule.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's Rams, Tampa Bay. Those are the two hardest teams in ours play. Like we said, they go to Seattle, smash them again. They're terrible. They're awful. They have nothing. I'm sad that DK Metcalf is stuck there because he's a Warrior fan. And then the following week, I think this is the trap game you might be talking about. Maybe it's the Raiders, but
actually, I think
the Commanders at home.
You just talked about it. I think it's the Seattle game, and I'll tell you why.
Really?
Yeah. It's very interesting to think because obviously the 49ers are much better than the Seahawks on paper. But when you look at it from a pure schedule perspective, this is a mid-December game. The 49ers are coming off a very tough opponent, like you said, in the what do you call it? In the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 14. Then you've got to travel on a short week to Seattle in the middle of the winter where it might be snowing at this time. December 15th, I believe, is the date in week
It
15.
doesn't snow in December in Seattle. I live there. It only
All right, but
snows
it's
in
cold.
January and
But it is
February.
cold. But it is cold. That is something that's
It's very
important.
cold.
Yeah, and so I think the weather change might be a little different. The one thing that I have in Seattle's favor, they face Carolina in week 14, and then they face the 49ers. Both of those games are at home, so they're going to be a little more acclimated to the weather conditions. I do think that might be in their favor. That the lack of travel also might be in their favor. And it's a division game, so you expect the stakes to even be amped up, even if Seattle is out of the race at this point. And so, just given that we always lose to Seattle for some reason or another, even without Russ, this might be a trap game, although I have them winning this game still.
No trap games against Seattle. We beat their ass both times. Come on. I don't want to lose to these guys anymore. I'm tired of it, especially now that they stink. So let's just round out the season. We got Washington at home. Commanders, who knows what they're going to be? I don't know. I don't know what Carson Wentz is going to look like. I think their defense might be okay, but the NFC East stinks, man. Like, I'm not afraid of any team in the NFC East. They're awful. The only reason I'd be afraid of the Eagles is because they have A.J. Brown, but then they have a quarterback who can't get him the ball. And it's like, the NFC East stinks. The 49ers showed why the NFC East stinks when they went into Dallas and they beat their ass, and despite the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo tried to give that game away.
Yeah, and I think this game, the 49ers, like I said, the last week is a short week, meaning this is the long preparation before you face the Commanders at home, especially. I think this
Yeah.
is going to play to the 49ers' favor, despite Carson Wentz owning the 49ers over the last couple of seasons, despite
Yeah.
whatever team he's on. I think the 49ers do win this game. I think the Commanders are, like, this might be a hot take, but I think the Commanders are one of the more overrated teams in the NFC East. I think that defense, a
Absolutely.
lot of people believe they're going to be a top 5 defense. That defense did not perform to standards last year. I understand Chase had a torn ACL, but before that, Chase wasn't playing to the level that he played the year before. And I mean, Chase Young, of course. I don't think that defense is as stacked as people believe it, although they have the potential to be. And so
Absolutely.
at this point of the season, late in the season, they might be competing for a playoff spot with the 49ers, but I expect the 49ers to overcome this game and win.
Then I'm going to answer this quick question, and we'll get to the last two. He says, who do you think will be the best teams in the NFC? I think he's right. Packers, Rams, Buccaneers, 49ers. I don't see any other teams being in the NFC that could beat out those 4 teams.
Yeah, and that's why I think 49ers are a top 4 seed, in my opinion, in the NFC this year.
Absolutely. It's really going to come down to if they win the division or they lose it to the Rams.
Yeah.
Final 2 games of the season, Las Vegas Raiders and the Cardinals at home. I personally think they'll lose to the Cardinals at home. The Raiders game will be interesting. It kind of depends on where the Raiders are at this point, who the Raiders are, where they are in the standings and all that stuff. But that's a team that's going to score a lot of points on a lot of teams. I just don't think I don't think the 49ers are going to lose to them personally.
To the Raiders. This is a very interesting game. I think the 49ers are going to go into a tough environment, obviously, in the Raiders. New Year's game, this should be a very highly anticipated game. I do think both teams are going to be in the mix for playoff spots as well at this point. 49ers probably more than the Raiders given their division. I'm actually penciled this in as a loss at first. I'm probably going to stick with it for now just because there isn't any additional information. I obviously could see it both ways. Really, this is just a competitive battle. Depends on the state of the franchises at this point. If 49ers somehow lock the division, you might not see them play as hard. If they haven't, you probably see them play a lot harder. Same thing with the Raiders, whether they're in the playoffs or not. And so, yeah, that might be something. I penciled this in as a loss just because you travel on the road to that environment, which the 49ers haven't been in, but it should be a close game.
And the final game, Arizona Cardinals, I think they lose this game because I think they've already made the playoffs, and I think their seeding can't change if they win or lose. So I think that that's why I think they'll split with the Cardinals, they'll split with the Rams, they'll sweep the Seahawks.
I actually had them sweeping the Cardinals. Maybe it's just been a bit of pride, but I do have them winning this game, Week 18. This is, I believe, at Levi's, so I have them winning the Cardinal game. I could see them losing one of these 2 games. If the 49ers beat the Raiders, they probably do have a playoff seed locked up, and they could definitely lose to the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I could definitely see it your way.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And that's the schedule. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. Rohan, thanks for joining me. We went a little over. If people want to check out your stuff, how can they do it?
Yeah, so you can see on the screen at Rohan Chakravarthi. That is my Twitter handle. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. Try and put out a bunch of 49er content on there. I cover the 49ers for 49ers Web Zone. So if you want written content, I have it all published there. And then my podcast stuff is all on my Twitter page as well. Link is in the description there at Rohan Chakravarthi. That is the YouTube handle. Be sure to check me out. I'm working my ass off as well, just like Nate, trying to get out daily content on there with certain content creators that I just really like enjoying to work with. And yeah, Nate, thank you so much for having me on. I know you've been through a hell of a week for sure. So it's just fun, to sit back, relax, and just talk something that we both enjoy. Glad to see you're okay. And yeah, definitely glad you got the support that you got after that. Whew.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been able to do a show Tuesday night after that car crash. I was
Oh hell, I wouldn't
still
allow you.
struggling.
If you asked me, if you after that picture, if you said you want to go, I'm gonna be like, no.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you were able to do it tonight. I'm glad we got a show out. I was worried I was gonna go 2 weeks without a show. I took a little mental break last week, but we're back. We're back on the train, and we'll see what happens. You can find me at 90849 on Twitter. Make sure if you checked out the show and you loved it, you hit that little like button, you subscribe, you tell your friends to subscribe, because we are still giving away a jersey once we hit 1,000. I know we're way off of that, but once we hit 1,000, we're giving away a jersey, any player you want, and it'll be the new one if you want it, or whatever you want. It's up to you. I don't really care. But just get subscribed, get ready. 4 days. 4 days? Can you believe it? 4 days?
49er football.
Well, 49er football news, I guess. Not actual football yet. Preseason's coming. And it's funny, you always look forward to preseason, then you get here and like, yeah, this shit sucks. But we're almost there. So until we see you next time, until the 49ers take the practice field, remember and never forget, hype train never stops, baby.